I'm Mike.
And I'm John.
And we are back at the Rock West Labs because we are going to be using the small starter kit today. John's going to show us how. Or you're going to show me how, right?
I'm going to coach you on how to do it.
Okay.
This is the beginner kit, so
I'm a beginner, right?
Kind of walk you through it.
Excellent.
See how it goes.
Okay. In the kit comes this Naca Duct.
Right.
Which you explained to me is not what I thought it was. It is a tool. It's a mold. First thing first.
Release agent.
No, John. Safety. So, safety glasses.
Safety glasses.
Check. And we also have gloves that come in the kit.
Right.
All right, let's put them on. You don't need them because you're not doing anything. You're just standing there. All right, now that we are properly safetied.
Now, release agent. We have to make sure that the part will come off of the tool. We put this high temperature paste wax. Just put a light coat on.
Well, since we're going to be molding over this,
right.
We're going to put it on the outside.
Put it on the outside. Now, if this is the first time the mold is being used, you want to put on as many coats as you can. 5, 6, 10. I've actually been putting the wax on throughout the day, and you're going to put on the last coat.
And typically, how long does it take to dry?
About between 5 and 15 minutes, depending on how much wax you put on there. You want to touch it and it doesn't feel waxy, it just feels dry. And it will also look a little hazy too. It looks good. You've covered every square inch of it, so that's good.
So we let the wax dry.
Right.
Slight haze.
So just gently wipe that off until it just gets kind of shiny. You don't want to put too much pressure on it. You just want to make sure you take the haze off of it. Next up is we need to have the cloth. So we'll take our cloth, we'll cut it to the basic size that it needs.
Sounds good. Now in the kit actually comes with carbon and fiberglass.
And fiberglass.
So for this one we're going to be using the fiberglass.
Correct. Fiberglass is the easiest way to learn because you can see through it, you can see bubbles, you can see where it isn't sticking to the part. With carbon you can't see that. So.
It pretty much covers it.
Right. So if you want to tuck it in here because that will use some of the material, so you could cut that right about there.
Now I understand we actually need something called resin.
Correct. One of the side effects of wet layup is that it can be a little bit messy.
Okay.
So we got some protective cover in here just so that we don't get our work surface too messy.
Now in this packet we actually have mini packets that have a 2-part epoxy system.
Right. So in this side here we have the resin A part and then we have the B hardener on this side.
And how long does it take for this system to set up or harden?
This has about a 10-minute pot life. Working life is about 30 to 35 minutes, depending on how thick your laminate is.
Can you explain the difference between a pot life and a working life?
Sure. So pot life is when you have all of your resin mixed up in the pot. It's a larger concentration of it, so it's going to heat up faster. The pot life is shorter than if you were to have it on a thin layer on your part. So it will cure faster in a mass than it will on a thin layer. It's called an exothermic reaction. Unlike polyester resins, if people have used polyester resins, you can mix those and they will always go hard even if you mix it poorly. But epoxies have to be mixed properly or you get soft spots.
How do you know when everything's mixed well?
Well, usually you can see a uniform color. Sometimes it will look milky, like it'll have some swirls in it. Mix it until the swirls are gone or mix it into a uniform color. First step, what do you think?
I would assume that we're going to put a light layer down on the actual tool to help the fabric stick to it.
It does.
So let's go ahead and start just a light application.
One thing to remember though is that while we're working on this, time is of the essence. We have to work knowing that the resin is hardening right now as we speak. Okay, so now take your fabric.
Okay. What
you want to do is set it on the top of it and work it out to the edges. Tuck it down on the sides. Sometimes you have to work both sides at the same time so that you don't cause it to stretch. Now here's where the tricky part is that you've got these corners right here, and as you tuck this to the back, what happens to those corners?
They kind of go out. It's like when I used to make my bed.
Yeah.
Back in the day. It's been a while.
Notice how this corner doesn't have very much. You can sometimes manipulate that fabric into the corners. So now you want to take your resin and start dabbing it on there. Because this tape is actually causing problems with that conformity, you can cut this material back closer and then it will help conform better.
Good idea.
So remember, if you brush it, you can deform the material and stretch it. So at this point, it might be better to dab the resin on.
Yeah, I notice when I'm dabbing it, it's definitely deforming the cloth.
Yeah, so when you're working on something like this, just make sure you're kind of tugging from the top down instead of from the side, like that. Perfect. The goal right now is to get the fabric wet out,
okay,
and then you can go back and put it in place. So
gotcha.
Get the flange entirely wet out. So get all the way up in here and over here. And now you want to be careful about how you put it into place. So right here, you want to work it from the top down into the corners, and then the flanges will work themselves out. And that's the other thing to watch out for, is that if you've got a bridge on this side and you push it in, you might be pulling a bridge on the other side.
Okay. So I'm going to do the trick and just run it with my fingers to make sure, while I'm holding one side, or run it with my fingers.
And on this first ply, you can have a little extra resin because the second ply will absorb that.
Now I feel like I'm gonna need more resin. Do the honors, please.
Yeah, we don't want your grubby hands gooping up
The hands
everything.
will get pretty sticky.
Sometimes it's just a very light touch, very deliberate in one direction. If the fabric is not complying the way you want it to,
yeah,
you are allowed to cut it. I'm actually going to trim this up a little bit more because it's causing some problems.
Okay. So you're just simply trimming the excess fabric.
Yep.
That's not touching the tool.
So using some light dabbing technique, you can get the corners to look pretty good.
It looks really good.
We have another ply that we need to put on. We can put that on now.
Should I go ahead and cut off the tape?
That would be a good idea. Yeah, don't try to peel the tape off because the edges will fray. Kind of work from the corners, and that will kind of help get it started. Before you start adding resin to it, use that to soak up the other layer. That
So
will,
almost like a dry brush. But
yeah, so that'll help guarantee that if you don't need resin, you don't put it on there. And I'm gonna cut this again, just to help us out.
All right. It is surprising how much the fabric stretches when you have the resin in it.
Yeah, but see how you've bunched up the top there?
Yep.
Yep. Pushed it from the flange.
It's just showing everyone at home what not to do.
Okay. Just go ahead and just get that resin on there everywhere first, and then we can work it.
Okay.
Just get it wet.
Get everything wet first.
Yep.
That's the key.
And you want to always make sure that your fabric is wet out beyond your edge line.
Okay.
So you can see some white stuff here. You can see the edge of the mold right there. Just make sure you can see the edge of the mold all the way around.
At this point, I feel like we have plenty of resin. How would you recommend when you have a part, start from the top and work around now?
Yeah, it's just like washing a car, right? So you never wash the car from the bottom up. You start from the top and you work your way down.
Great tip.
And you want to look for differences in color. So right here, I can see a lot of open fibers. So you want to add a little bit of resin. You want it to be solid looking.
And again, the only reason we can see this is because it's fiberglass.
Right.
If we were doing this with carbon,
we wouldn't be able to see these flaws. You wouldn't see these bubbles that are forming on the sides. Yeah, you might need some more resin. It's looking a little bit dry. You want it to look almost see-through instead of hazy like it is. So we can see now, as we look at it, I can see a great big bubble forming on the inside of these corners right here. So now it becomes more critical in how we get it in there and then leave it alone.
okay.
See, so now you can see those. You want to make sure that you're pushing on the exact opposite side of where you are. Sometimes the biggest trick is knowing when to walk away.
All right.
Say, I've tried it the best I can, I'm there, I have to stop. You're not quite there.
I feel there.
Downside to wet layup, complex details are hard to get perfect.
But the upside, it's pretty
is
inexpensive.
It's super cheap to do, and sometimes the results are good enough. We're gonna let this sit, let this cure now.
All right.
I think we're at the point where we can just walk away from it. Sometimes you'll notice that you'll get done and it looks perfect, and you walk away and you come back an hour later and it's too late and big bubbles have formed. That's just part of the learning process.
All right.
And it does happen.
How long should we give this to cure?
We can wait 24 to 48 hours. If we try to take it off the mold when it's not cured all the way, it'll be very flexible or green. We call it green.
All right.
Just like a green limb on a branch, it bends that it doesn't quite break, that's the same thing we'd have here. And when it's green like that, it doesn't want to come off the mold very easy because it's just flexing instead of using its stiffness to pop off.
All right, well, let's give it 24 hours and be back.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. All right, we are back, and about 36 hours later.
Right.
No need for gloves since everything's dry, as long as you're careful. Try not to cut yourself.
Right.
Because there can be some sharp edges. How do we take it off the tool? What's the best way?
Best way is to try to get under it and separate it from the tool with a wedge. But this part in particular is pretty flexible. Hopefully everything will just pop off.
I'm just gonna start working it. Put on the table, some pressure down.
Yep, work it around.
I can see the fabric separating from the tool.
Right. This is where it gets a little bit tricky because now we have to separate it from the sidewalls, which are vertical. Sometimes just putting extra popsicle sticks around it, giving it some pressure.
And remember, the sides could be sharp with this, so.
Exactly.
As I see,
we can also
see some air coming under here.
That's right.
All right.
Maybe stack some on top of each other to give you some pressure.
Stacking, stick stacking. Okay.
You can see the air is migrating underneath it now, so it is releasing.
Difference between where the part's still stuck to the tool.
And we want to be careful that we don't fracture the fiberglass.
So I'm basically just putting it in and twisting. It's kind of snapped the stick. Maybe I'll try it with two.
Slide some more sticks under there and just give it some constant pressure while you work the other edges.
There it goes.
But we have to remember that we can break the part, so we have to be careful not to use too much force. So now this might be the part where we take this and just work in there a little bit.
All right.
So maybe we can push on the part itself sometimes.
Patience.
Patience is the key.
So you can see just a little section is stuck. I really just want to grab the part and pull it. What do you think about that?
Not quite yet.
Ah, okay. I heard that snap, and I think that means it's free for the big reveal. Voila! We have a Naca Duct.
The reason why that was so difficult to get off, the release agent did its job, but we have a lot of surface tension on these flat surfaces that we weren't able to get leverage under very well, and these sidewalls don't help that. So the sidewalls don't like to release. A differently shaped part, something with a little bit more draft in these directions, and it would have popped off much easier. So this is an extreme example of sometimes how difficult it is. But a little patience, using softer materials so we don't damage our part or our mold. And we can get the part off.
Voila. Now, how would you recommend actually cleaning up this fiber?
Well, if it's really thick, we have to use a grinder. With this one, it's so thin that we can actually use scissors. So if you just grab those scissors, you can cut the edges off.
There's just. Oh yeah. Cuts pretty easily.
Let's inspect your layup. On the flanges, we have a really nice glossy surface, just like our mold. But here on these inside corners here, where we had the bubbles,
there's still some bubbles there.
That's what happened. So this is actually not bad. I would say this is really excellent for the first time you've done it.
Give me a C, C plus?
I'd give you a B plus.
Yes.
For how long you've been doing it. But you can see here that in some of these corners there was just nothing you could do. So some people like to load it up with resin, which is not recommended because then it's just resin there and not fiber. The other option here is in these corners here, where we have all these things, we could have cut the material to make it easier to go around, and that would have relaxed the fibers. It just depends on if you want seams or not, if you can afford to have seams. This was a good example of how easy it is to lay up flat things and how difficult it is to lay up contoured parts.
Well, if you have any questions about this process or the kit, you can email John or me. And next time we'll actually show you how to use a vacuum to get a better part. Thanks.